Anno 1800 is developed by Blue Byte, and it's the newest game in the venerable series which began 21 years ago with Anno 1602, Creation of a New World. It's available for $60 or $70 depending on what edition you buy, and you can get it from Uplay or the Epic Games Store. Like previous entries, Anno 1800 is a city-building real-time strategy game, focusing on developing relatively small island colonies, engaging in naval combat, and fostering trade and diplomacy with rival factions. While similar at its core to earlier entries, 1800 brings some welcome changes and additions to the table, and its decision to return to its historical roots sets it apart from the last two games in the series, Anno 2205 and Anno 2070. And so everyone knows, I haven't played many entries in the series, so this review is more geared towards people who may never have played an Anno game before, or at least just not much of them, and maybe they're interested in getting in with this new entry. And now just before we get into it, full disclosure, I was provided a review copy by Ubisoft, but this is in no way a paid review, and of course all the opinions here are completely my own. So without further ado, here's my review of Anno 1800. Like I said earlier, Anno 1800 is at its core quite similar to its older siblings. If you've played a game in the series before, you'll most likely be quite familiar with its main systems of city building and management. As for me, I've really only played Anno 2070 for any decent amount of time, so that's going to be my main reference point for this review. When you begin, you're offered the choice of playing either the game's story campaign, or you can jump into free mode or multiplayer. The campaign also serves as a tutorial for the game, as it will eventually transition into a free mode session once you've completed the narrative, and that'll probably take you around 15 hours or so. While the game does try to make the story meaningful, its tale of avenging your father and restoring the family legacy during the Industrial Revolution is basically non-existent. And like I said, it really only exists to teach you the game's mechanics and elements, of which there are quite a lot of. But honestly, I'm fine with this myself. I'd never be looking to play a city builder for the story. I am 100% here for the satisfying and addicting gameplay that the genre can provide, and Anno 1800 has that in buckets. The feeling of starting with nothing and developing a flourishing nation with colonies on multiple islands is as gratifying as ever, mainly due to the minute details and mechanics that you'll find throughout your journey. Here's the core loop that persists throughout the whole game. You essentially build houses for civilians to provide income and work in your production factories, and you provide amenities to the civilians via your factories to keep them happy. And with that core loop, you expand your colony, develop more varied production lines to provide for more demanding residents, and essentially just rinse and repeat until you win or decide to call it quits and start all over again. While by the end of the game there are a huge number of resources to gather, a goods to manufacture to keep your city running, the game does a great job in easing you into all of its avenues. There's only a couple of resources you'll need to gather when you start out, and more are unlocked as you further develop your technology. They're mainly unlocked in tiers, which are determined by 3 levels of civilians. Each civilian residence you build always starts as farmers, but they can be upgraded once all their needs have been met. Each tier demands more niceties than the last one, but they also provide more income and they unlock even more new buildings for your city. You're required to keep a balance of all 3 tiers, as your fancy top-level artisans aren't going to be tending any crops or making the bread that feeds your city. They'll leave that to the others. And now, while the game is mostly about developing and managing your colonies, there are other things you'll be doing. There's a fairly in-depth trade system which allows you to assign ships to individual routes to neighbouring islands, which can then buy and sell specific amounts of items along them. And while the system does eventually make sense despite its lack of tutorials, I wish you could set ships to trade items up or down to a specific amount relative to how many you have on your island, instead of just setting a number of an item to buy or sell, despite how many of them you might have sitting in your warehouse. Speaking of other islands, while some are uninhabited and ripe for the taking, others will be preoccupied, and it's up to you to decide how you want to approach your relations with the groups who own them. Some will flat out just not like you, in which case you might be forced to teach them a lesson, which you can do by building a variety of combat-ready vessels and sending them their way. Others might be more friendly, however, and a more diplomatic option of treaties and alliances may be a better way, which unfortunately also lack any real tutorials to help you figure out the system. The game also allows you to send vessels on expeditions to the New World, which require you to load them up with supplies with the goal of finding new land to explore and eventually colonize, which is a nice way to add even more longevity to games. And as you can probably guess, playing a game of Anno 1800 can take a long time due to its many systems and gameplay options, which I think is a valid point to make clear. It's got great depth, but it definitely requires you to put in the hours if you want to get the most out of it. Graphically, Anno 1800 looks great. Lighting and foliage is particularly eye-catching, and while some effects like cannon fire from ships are a bit underwhelming, overall it's all really good quality stuff. Something that impressed me a lot was the detail when zooming right into the thick of your cities. You can see workers at their jobs, farm animals being raised, and just get a general feel of liveliness that's really genuine. Your cities truly do feel like living ecosystems, not just the pixels on a computer screen. My main criticism with the graphics, however, is that a lot of the buildings can often blend into each other once you've got a few clumped in one place. A lot of them do look really unique, but some can be tough to tell what they are just by looking at them. Overall, the game's audio is pretty great, especially the soundtrack. While the voice acting is fine, it's nothing amazing, but it's fine. The music really shines and it sets a great tone for the game. The relaxing and inspiring tunes keep things feeling positive, even when your economy might be falling off a cliff. And when things do get dramatic, whether through combat or maybe a fire, it changes to match. As far as the kind of computer you'll need to run Anno 1800, while the game's listed requirements aren't super high, like most city builders, things can get a bit framey once you've got a lot of stuff going on. Even on my PC, which is fairly powerful, the FPS can tank a bit when you're zooming in and looking around populated areas. It's not unplayable or anything, but you might find you need to drop the graphics settings down a bit if you want to maintain a solid frame rate. If you've made it in this far, then you can probably tell I've really enjoyed my time with Anno 1800. As someone who indulges in a city builder maybe once every year or two, this has definitely scratched an itch that hasn't been scratched since I played City Skylines a few years back. The gameplay loops are addicting and extremely satisfying, and it's just one of those games where you can easily just forget how long you've been playing until you realise it's 3 in the morning and you haven't stood up in 5 hours. While I have some minor complaints about some especially confusing systems for newcomers like myself, like the trading and diplomacy, overall the campaign does do a great job at introducing all of its nuances, and it sets you up well for either playing with your friends or solo with the AI. Graphically, the game obviously looks gorgeous, and you'll undoubtedly find yourself humming the soundtrack after you finish playing. As for the game's longevity, the developers have promised to keep the game fresh with free updates throughout the year, and they'll also be releasing 3 paid DLC expansions, which you're sure to be pleased about if you're enjoying the game. If you're into city builders or slower paced RTSs and you're looking for a new time sink, then I would highly recommend Anno 1800 as a way to satisfy that craving. And if you're an existing fan of the series, then you'll be pleased to know that this new entry leaves the disappointing Anno 2205 behind it and returns to form with its traditional historical setting. Thanks everyone so much for watching. Now, just so everyone knows, I have one more video that was made on the backlog before moving home, so you can probably tell this is done with a new microphone and the video is a lot higher quality in terms of resolution and graphics. It says we've got the new PC all set up, but next weekend's video will be done on the old system, so just bear through that, and after that we will be all good to go with our new setup. If you want to follow the channel on updates and future videos, then you can follow me on Twitter, which is twitter.com/Zaid_95. And I live stream on Twitch 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, starting at 2 PM Pacific, 5 PM Eastern, twitch.com/Zaid_95. Thanks everyone again so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this new style of video. I haven't reviewed a new game before, so let me know what you think and if you'd like to see more of them, and we will see you all next time.